happened 30 seconds ago?
What?
What happened?
Didn't say anything.
What you said?
Aiden, you're a troublemaker.
What did you do, Aiden? What happened?
All right, let's get started. I want to make sure that we use our time effectively. So the number one thing I would say about these review sessions is if you're too tired to attend the review session or to be focused or to actually get something out of it, it's way better for you not to come, because you can watch the recording or whatever recording there is of it, or come at another time when you feel more refreshed. But I don't want you distracting other people during the review session. So if you don't want to be here, that's okay. You don't have to be, but we want to use this time as effectively as we can. All right. So let's try to get through, especially today. What I wanted to do for you is really explain how the survivor part of the test is going to work. It's 50 points of the 100. So what's the best way for you to be prepared for it? What are some strategies that will allow you to be successful? Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to remind you, I just gave you an updated copy of this. It's also updated online, and it's correct online on our class homepage, or you can just go there. All the links on this document work on the online version, but I just printed this out for you today. I would ask you to take particular attention to the dates of the review sessions, because on the original paper that I had sent out to everybody, it was wrong. So these are the correct dates and times for review sessions. So please make sure you note, today's obviously, then there's Friday after school from 3:15 to 4:15. There's Sunday from 2 to 4. There's Tuesday, March 1st from 2:30 to 3:30, and Wednesday, March 2nd from 9 to 9:45. So those of you that have the test on the first day, obviously you have 3 review sessions. Those of you that have the test on the March 2nd date, you guys actually have 2 additional review sessions. The movie on Friday is right after the review session. I just thought that would be easier, that we could watch the movie right after the review. Okay. Glory. Okay. Any other questions about the review sessions? Somebody asked me earlier, am I going to cover the same thing at every review session? The answer is no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try as best I can to cover as much material as I can across all the review sessions, and I will try to answer questions as they come up at review sessions. But I do plan to sort of cover in these first 3 review sessions 3 separate things, really. I'm going to try to cover as much as I can about Survivor today, and then in the next review session, I'm going to dig deep into the actual terms. So on Friday's review session, we'll look at some of the terms for Survivor a little more carefully. And then on the weekend review session, we'll have time to kind of go into those and sort of where do they fit. If you had the choice, which one would you want, et cetera. So I'll try to do a little bit of different stuff at each review session. Okay. Any questions about how the review sessions are set up? I will try to record all of them and post them, but keep in mind, I can't really post a recording that's like 2 hours long. So I probably will cut the review session, especially the Sunday review session. I'll probably just try to post some parts of it, but I won't be able to post the whole thing. So just keep in mind that that's the case. All right. Any questions about the reviews?
Yeah, Sunday. That's like 2 to 4.
Is that a question or is that a statement?
Is it here?
Yes. Here from 2 to 4 on Sunday.
Like,
It's totally optional. If you don't want to come, you don't have to come. It's just for those of you that need that extra review or you want to go through it. I'm happy to do it for you.
I think I need to come, but I can't.
Okay, well, you probably can, but you might not want to. All right, so let's talk about Survivor. Let's talk about how the game works. So as part of your exam, you know that what I'm actually measuring is skill here. And what are the skills that I'm actually trying to measure with the Survivor game? I'm trying to measure critical thinking, collaborative problem solving, and communication. So as you think about what I'm trying to actually accomplish there, what I'm trying to have you do is I'm actually trying to have you work in teams in order to review some of this key material from the period right after the Civil War. So the first thing that I would suggest that everybody do before you start digging into sort of how to be successful on this part of the test, if you haven't already done so, which you should have, but if you haven't already done so, watch the video that is posted on the PDF version of this document. It's also posted on the homepage for the class. So this progress video, which is about 24 minutes long, summarizes the different categories that I think these terms fall into during this time after the Civil War. So basically, from 1865 to 1900, after the Civil War is over, the question is going to be, how close does America come to Lincoln's promise, right? How close does America come to the promise that Lincoln gives in the Gettysburg Address, this promise of equality, this promise of freedom, this promise that the country is going to be what we promised we would be, that we're going to be the last best hope of earth. That's one of the things Lincoln said in one of his speeches, that America was going to be, or had to be, the last best hope of earth. So when you think about that, how close have we come to that in this time period from 1865 to 1900? And I would argue there are 4 categories that you would want to consider during that time period. 4 categories of change, of growth, of adaptation, of improvement, of progress that we can talk about. The 4 categories, which I talk about in the video, are Reconstruction, which is what? What's Reconstruction? Putting the country back together after the Civil War. So that's what happens to all the freed slaves. What happens to those 4 million people who are now supposedly equal citizens, right? That's Reconstruction. What happens to the states that said they left the Union when Lincoln said, no, you can't leave the Union. That's not allowed. Like, what happens? What happens after Lincoln dies? What does Lincoln's death mean for that Reconstruction period? So one category of terms in progress is Reconstruction. Another category is westward movement / imperialism. When I say westward movement, what am I talking about? The growth of the country from the eastern states or even the Midwestern states to now these new states that are going to be added to the Union. So when you think about the Transcontinental Railroad, you think about people moving west to go and find things in the West that they need or they want, things that are going to give them a new life, right? People moving out there to claim part of the American dream. You're going to look at things like the fact that the Native Americans are kind of in the way for those people, and that's going to lead to wars or conflicts with the Native people. So you're going to have the Indian Wars are going to happen right at that time. So when you think about westward movement, it's that sort of growth of the country west and what impact that has on other people. So things like the Union Pacific Railroad, that would be a term that would fall under there, right? Because that's the Transcontinental Railroad. Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows would be a term that falls into that category. So when you think about what are the things that fall into westward expansion, how does that fit with progress? That's an important question. Third category is industrial growth. Industrial growth basically is the rise of capitalism in America and all of the pros and cons that go along with that. Lots of new jobs, lots of new inventions, new products, things like Alexander Graham Bell's products that he creates, Thomas Edison's products that he creates, eventually Henry Ford's products. Those things are going to come about during this time period from the end of the Civil War to the 1900s, where you're going to have this massive growth of capitalism. Lots of positive there, lots of progress there. But what else happens? Workers get used in that process. People die in those factories. So there's a negative to that. There's a downside to it. There's a cost to it. And so those are some of the negative things that happen during that time period. So that would be the industrial growth period. And then the fourth category is the American dream. That would be the idea of going from rags to riches, right? That would be the idea of coming from a foreign country as an immigrant and finding your way and making your way in America. And as you watch the video, you'll see all of these things that I talk about the growth of the country, the number of immigrants that come from different places. Where do a lot of them go? They go to cities. So what happens? The cities grow. You get skyscrapers, you get tenement buildings, you get all of the things that relate to the growth of cities as a result of that. So when you think about these four categories, the best way for you to think about this is that each of these categories tells the story of progress in America after the Civil War. In some cases, there's lots of steps forward. In other cases, there are steps back. And whether it's a step forward or a step back, it either contributes to progress or it hinders progress. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So your job in this game is essentially to identify of those terms, and there are 13 terms for each of the 4 teams, of those terms, which had the most impact on progress, right? So as you think about what that means, what we're talking about here is like which of these terms had the most impact on either promoting progress or limiting progress. And the more impact they had, the more points each of those terms is worth.
Wait, did you decide?
I did. So each of those terms already has a point value associated with them. You don't know what that point value is. Part of your job here is to try to figure that out. So as you look at your list, let's say you walk into the room on the day of the exam and you are on team 1. You have 13 terms that you're starting the game with. But as the game progresses, you've got to try to figure out which of those terms do you want to hang on to, and which terms from the other teams might you want to get if they're stupid enough to throw them away. And they will. Every time I've played this game, in the first round of the game, people throw away winning terms. So the more prepared you are to know if somebody throws something out that you want it, you want to take it. And I'll explain how that process works in a minute. So first of all, the very first step in this process would be to take a look at your terms. And obviously you don't know what team you're going to be on. So the more you know about all the terms, the better. Take a look at the terms, and you should know that I've made it equal to start. So each of the teams with your 13 terms have an equal point value. Does that make sense? There is no advantage to being on one team or another. So you look at those terms and you know that they're each worth points from like in a range of points. And what you're going to do is try to figure out how much they're worth. So some of the terms on that list are worth 1 point. That means they have less impact. Some of them are worth 5 points. That means they have more impact. And as you get rid of your cards, your terms, as you throw them out on the table, other teams can pick them up. When those teams pick them up, they're going to have to throw other cards out. So they might pick something up worth 5 points and throw something out worth 4 points. And you might have something worth 1 point that you want to take the 4-point card and throw away your 1-point card. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? The object of the game is to get as many points as you can. That's how you win Survivor. If you win Survivor, automatic 50 out of 50 on that part of the test. All right. So the more points you have, the better. Now, how do you figure out your points? The first thing you want to do is as you go through the list and you get on your team, the very first thing you're going to want to do, the first 15 minutes or so of the test period, will be your team arguing about what to get rid of at the end of round 1. Like, of our cards, what do we want to keep the most? So when you walk into the test, let's say you're on team 3, you're going to go through that list and you're going to say, what do we want to keep? What are we willing to part with? And more importantly, what on the other 3 lists do we want if we can get it? Does that make sense? So how can you estimate the point value of your cards? What's the best way to do that? Right. So argue the impact. So look at one of the terms on the list and sort of say, what category does it fall into? If it falls into more than one category, that's good, because that means it's sort of worth more impact, right? If it only falls in one category, but is super impactful, that's also good. But if it's a term that only falls in one category and maybe doesn't make that big of an impact, then you know it's probably not worth as much.
Wait, what if it's a bad impact? Is that
The
what-
bad impact is still impact, right? That's a really good question, Tyler. You're not just looking for things that made progress. You're looking for things that either made or hindered progress, right? So, for example, in Reconstruction, there are some things that really made the country better. There are things that really tried for equality, really tried to set out the idea of equality. But then there are other things that took that equality away and sort of ignored those changes. So those things might balance each other out on the list, right? So as you look through, as you prepare your list, and if you guys want to work together to make your list, that's fine. I don't care how you prepare what each of these terms are. All I'm telling you is that I'm going to check your notes as part of the preparation. So if you're using a Google Doc that 5 people contributed to, you're going to share that doc with me so I can look through the history and see who contributed, like who put what into this document. Are you just using someone else's notes and you did nothing and you're just using the notes they made? If you made the notes, did you just copy everything from Wikipedia and just paste it in? Which if you do that, fine, but that make sure you know what that stuff is about. Make sure you know it's right and that it talks about the impact of those things. So you've got to think critically about these things as you walk into the game. So I don't care what resources you share. And in this part of the game, you can use anything you want for this part of the game. But the game only lasts for 45 minutes. So you're not going to have time when the game starts to start looking up definitions. That's all got to be done before you walk into the room. Does that make sense, everyone? See how it works? Now, there is another way that you can learn some point value. So if you look at the rules of the game, one of the things that you will see is that each of the rounds, it gives you an opportunity to ask the point value of one of your cards. So as your team is debating round 1, you could say to me, let's say your team won, you could say, Mr. Hughes, how much is Horatio Alger worth? And I would tell you how much Horatio Alger is worth. So that would give you a measure of like, okay, if Horatio Alger is worth 2, what are these other things worth? But you do. So if you use that, if you get that assist from me, then let me rephrase that. If you don't use that assist, at the end of the game, you get an additional point added to your team score. So not using that assist gives you a bonus point, but using that assist might be useful because it really tells you where you stand. You get to use 2 assists, 1 in the first round, 1 in the second round. So that's it. You don't have to use either one if you don't want. If you use 1 assist, then you don't get that bonus point at the end. If you don't use either of your assists, you get 2 bonus points added to your team score. So does everyone understand how it works? So there's an advantage to not using the assist, but there's also a huge advantage to finding out a point value of a card that you might throw away. And like if you're debating it and saying, this might be worth a lot, but it might not be worth anything, and you ask me and I say, that's worth 5, that's a huge reveal for you, right? Because it makes a big difference in the strategy of the game. So a big part of the critical thinking exercise is really measuring the value of these things and trying to figure out which is worth more than the others.
So if you don't use the assist in the first round, can you use 2 in the second?
No, good question. You only get 1 assist each round. And it's only first round, second round. You don't get an assist in the final round.
How many cards each are 5? Like how many holding in?
I'm not going to tell you that.
And second, can we trade with a piece? Like
Trade cards?
yeah, like I'll give
Well, you ultimately will trade cards because what's going to happen is when you throw a card out. So look at how it works. This is what makes it really interesting. The first part of the game is actually relatively easy because your first eliminations should be relatively simple, right? You should be able to identify which things are more impactful and which things aren't. I haven't tried to be super tricky with this. Like there are some things that you can pretty clearly eliminate early on. I mean, it might be hard. Like there might be a couple that you're going to argue about, but there should be some that are obviously not top card worthy, right? But one of the things that will happen, I guarantee you it will happen, is that one team at least will throw away a card worth 4 or 5 points in the first round. You want that card. So if they do throw that away, you want that card. Now, one of the things that will make the game interesting is once the cards that are thrown out are dead in the game, nobody wants to pick anything up, and all those cards that are thrown out are dead, I'll show you the values of all those cards because those cards are out of the game. Do you see? So you'll see like what you've thrown away. One of the things I can tell you is that every time I've played this game, people will throw away a really important card in the first round, and some people will pick it up and they'll end up with like 3 or 4 really high value cards as they go through the game, and making sure you know what those are makes a big difference, right? So figuring out those impacts are going to be important. So as you look at the terms, you can see the best way to do this is going to be to try to figure out what cards you're willing to throw away in the first round. Then it gets tough because then you've got to throw away another set of cards. So you get down to 4 cards. So ultimately, you're only going to have 4 cards left out of your 13. And that second round of eliminations, lots of point value cards are going to be thrown out. And so your team's knowledge of these different terms is going to be super important. Now, you don't know what team you're on until you walk into the room. You don't know which terms are yours. So the more adept you are to help your team in the game by being able to know, like, you know what, I think we're team 1, but I think JP Morgan, Race Riots, and Tenements are really important in team 2. If they throw away any of those, we should try to get those. Like, the more you can bring value to your team by making that kind of argument, the better your team's going to do, right? The very end, when we have 4 cards left, in order for your team to earn a little bit of bonus or to persuade me that your cards are worth points, I'm going to let each member of the team make one statement. No argument, no like back and forth. Like, I'll let each person from each team, you get to speak once. You don't have to, but you get to speak once. And you can either defend your terms, argue why they're important, or you can criticize the other team's terms in comparison to yours, whatever you want to do. But each person on the team gets to speak one time. Then I'll reveal the point values of the cards, and I'll let you know which team earned bonus points for their arguments.
Should we try to have like a balance between the 4 categories, or does it not matter?
Great question. So I actually did balance the terms in the start of the game, but as we proceed through the game, you don't necessarily need to do that. Remember, your goal is to have the terms that are worth the most points. But I can tell you that what I tried to do as I created the points and created the terms is I tried to make sure there was a bit of a balance there. Not necessarily that there's like 4 or 5 point terms, like that's not the case. But let's say team 2 has a 5-point term from the Western movement. Team 1 might have a 5-point term from industrial growth. Team 3 might have a 5-point term from American Dream. Do you see what I mean? So the points overall starting the game are equal for each list, but I'm not telling you like in which category they would fall. So that's something you need to try to figure out, because honestly, Ben, some of them cross multiple categories. Okay.
Wait. So how would I find that? Like, that would take a while to find out, like, how much they're all worth.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's why I'm giving it to you now for an exam that's happening next week, right? And at the review sessions, we can talk about some of these terms. So especially on Sunday's review session, I'm happy to go through any of them. And if you say, Mr. Hughes, what do you think is the point or impact, or why is O.O. Howard important? Like, what did he do? Like, who cares about Oliver Otis Howard? We'll talk about Oliver Otis Howard. We'll talk about what he did and why he was important on Sunday's review session. So as you think about like those, yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. So what I'll try to do is save time at each review session to answer questions that people have about whatever people they want to ask about. So as you start preparing for the test data and you're making your own sort of list of these people, you could say, if you come to the review session and you haven't gotten to Jacob Reese or Sam Tilden or Taylorism and you want me to explain those terms, I can do that at those review sessions. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? So does everyone understand how the game works? So it'll be fun actually when we play, because you actually will have to try to figure out which terms are right, and people will throw away terms you want right away, and you're going to see, and what kind of poker face do you have to not let other people know you want that term? Yeah, but you'll still, some people, I'm just, no, just let me say, like, let me just give you an example. The trial of Andrew Jackson, when like some lawyers would like put their head down on the desk when like members of their team were not answering questions the way they wanted them to be answered. So that's an example of a bad poker face. So,
Josh,
all right. So does everyone understand how the game works? So first thing to do, watch the video. Second thing to do, start maybe defining these terms, make a Google Doc where you start putting information about these people. It's not going to be useful if you copy 5 Wikipedia pages about Booker T. Washington and paste all that information in. You're not going to be able to use that during the test. So really focus a little paragraph for each of these about why they're important, why they're significant. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to come up with some color coding system.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
So if you think Booker T. Washington fits in American Dream and Reconstruction, which I do, then you'd have both colors there for that. So you can say it fits into both of those categories. Does Booker T. Washington fit in westward expansion? No, right? Not really. There's nothing there about Booker T. Washington's contributions that fit with that. Yeah.
With learning, are any of these terms going to be used for like the written part? Like the reading part?
Yeah, good question. So are any of these terms going to be used for the written part of the test later on? Not really. There might be some things connected to the short answer part. But remember, on the short answer part of the test, you're not allowed to use your notes. But you shouldn't have to memorize any of this stuff. Like, no, you shouldn't have to do that. Because even using it in the game like this, you're going to basically know what you need to know about them. Any other questions about that? So everyone understand how best to prepare for part 1 of the test?
Can they come to you if you have questions about the terms like outside of your research?
Yep, for sure. And I'll actually have office hours on those other days when we don't have so come see me anytime and I'm happy to go over any of them with you. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone how the game is going to work? So as you go through and prepare, watch the video and then start making information about these terms. And then what you might want to do on your own notes, even if you're using other people's, if you're sharing resources, make a copy of that. And maybe you should start ranking the things. So if you got on team 1, how would you rank those terms? A really good way to study and prepare before you walk into the test would be, once you have all these terms defined, go through each of these lists and just write a number next to each of them. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Estimate what you would value them at. So when you walk in and you're put on a team, maybe Connor's got one list of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Jay's got another list of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Gabby's got another list of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They can collaborate and say, look, we all said that Cyrus Field is a 4. There's some consensus there around that, right? And then if there isn't consensus, if somebody says KKK is a 5 and someone else says it's a 1, then you would want to argue that back and forth with your team and decide, is it a 5? Is it a 1? Is it someplace in the middle? Right? So I think those are important to think about. Okay. Any other questions about that?
Tyler, that's not what.
It's like KKK equals a 5.
No, I didn't say it. I was saying, oh dear. Okay, so. All right. So the best way you can prepare, oh, sorry, that was your shot shoulder, right? So let's remember that. Also, so remember for part 3 of the test, I'm going to be asking you some short answer questions, and I'm trying to give you hints about those short answer questions when we're talking about the stuff in History Quest. So as you pay attention in History Quest, assuming that you are, it's giving you hints to some of those things. Let me give you an example. At the next review session, I'll actually show you this question, but one of the questions of the 4 questions on the short answer is to speak as Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frederick Douglass in sort of a debate, right? So I'm going to be giving you on the question some quotes from them, some documents from them, and they're having a bit of a debate like at the Manifest Destiny conference. Of course, I chose those 2 people. They're both in the History Quest questions. So knowing about Elizabeth Cady Stanton and what she said and what she argued for, knowing what Frederick Douglass said, what he argued for, those things will be helpful to prepare for the exam, right? So that's an example of pay attention to the question topics in History Quest, because that will help you have some information for the test itself. At the next review session, I'll actually show you that question so you can actually see what it looks like. Okay.
I'm backtracking a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but we can work as a group. but like, what if I have like 4 people in my group? And then,
Uh-huh.
like, I do team 1, they do team 2, and like they all research, will we all get like points? with the
No,
right-
no. So what I'm saying, so let's say you want to work with some classmates to sort of make your own, like, remember, when you come into the room, just randomly, some of them might be in your group and some of them might not be, right? So, but that's okay. Like, let's say the 3 of you collaborate and make a list of terms and you each do some of the terms. And then when you come into the class, you're each on different teams. You can each still use your document that you created to sort of work on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to share that document with me so that I can go through and see, like, what did Tyler contribute to this document?
Well, yeah, but like, here's the thing, like, would I get 1/4 credit if I did 1/4 of the terms and then they would all get 1/4 credit?
No. It was like, if you did 1/4 of the terms and they did the other 3/4 of the terms, yes, you get 1/4 of the
No,
credit.
no. See, like, this is Tyler's section, this is player B section, this is player
Yeah,
C.
I understand. That's
the
fine.
rule-
You
that's
can
the
do that.
rule.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Just trying to
Yeah.
get some good
Can we come in with things that aren't notes? Like, can we come up with like,
Sure. Yeah, but only on the,
the.
only on the first part of the test. You're not allowed to use notes on part 3. So you can't use notes on the short answer questions, but you shouldn't have to anyway. The stuff I'm going to ask you about in the short answer sections, I'm either going to give you what you need. So another one of the short answer questions is a video. You're going to have to watch the video and answer questions related to the video, right? So like those, that's the way that part works. Part 3 of the test will actually be online. You'll actually take it on your computer or iPad.
Wait,
So part 3 is like the first test we had.
Yes,
we have a 30-minute hardness discussion?
yes.
How's that fair? Because there's kids that just take over.
Okay.
You said this last time.
Yeah, we've had this argument before.
Yeah, it was a
I will
big
take that into
drag.
consideration. Any other questions?
Only 10 points.
Wait, the hardness is 10 points.
You know what that means? 30 minutes. Means every 3 minutes.
You can still get a 90,
Right?
right, Connor?
Every short answer.
Is there a maximum of points that you can bank?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you how much it is until I see the sort of results of the
Can we
test.
use those like points that you use to begin?
No. You mean the little coupon?
Yeah.
No, the coupon cannot be applied to the exam. It can be applied to anything else.
I lost.
It says right on the coupon anyway that you can't use it for the exam. I have one for you in my office. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, part 2. Yeah. So we will start with the survivor game. Then we will move to the Harkness, and then you'll have the rest of the time. And if you need extra time to work on the written part. Okay. That good for today, everybody? Everyone good? All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. See you later.
Why? Alright, so I will create my own. Jake, how will Jake that up? If you really hate me.